Welcome to Resilient in Business, a podcast where we dive into insights, strategies, and systems to help you build scalable, thriving businesses. My name is Jad Atwe. I'm an engineer, an entrepreneur, and a business coach. Our intention from this show is to provide value and inspire entrepreneurs to keep pushing forward no matter the challenges. If you enjoy the content, subscribe and help us spread the message. Now, let's get into today's episode. Today, I'm excited to be here with David Barnett. David is an author, a speaker, a business acquisitions consultant, a coach. He's also an appraisal. I came across David's work through YouTube, where he's providing a lot of value for his listeners about how to buy a business from both sides of it. Like he helps explains to the seller what needs to be done, as well as the purchaser, things to look for, very valuable insights without any of the fluff that other people in this space have in order to get some clicks and things like that. His approach is very direct, reasonable, and that's why he resonated. I've been following him for a very long time, and today here he is. Thank you, David, for joining us. For those that don't know about your journey, what would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for inviting me on. I think that to get an idea of who I am, growing up, I always had an interest in business, and I was always doing these little teenager businesses when I was a child, and especially growing up in Canada, I would earn money by shoveling snow and then mowing people's lawns in the summertime. Eventually evolved into looking at different opportunities, and I had some of those jobs that teenagers will often have. They worked in the movie theater and things like that. And so I knew that I was interested in business, and I went to business school because I thought that that's what they taught you there. It was a while before I realized that what they really teach in business school is how to be a person within one of these big companies, one of these big multinational companies. And that's really not where my heart or interest has always been. I've always been very creative and wanted to build businesses, just like an artist wants to sculpt clay or paint with paintbrushes or something. I wanted to create something that would work and create value for customers and solve their problems and earn money for myself along the way. And so eventually, when I got out of university, I was very fortunate that I got a job with the Yellow Pages. And so before the internet, the Yellow Pages was the Google of business, because if you needed any kind of service in your local community, this was the place that you looked to find businesses that you could get services or products from. And so I got to go and meet with the owners and managers of these businesses as I talked with them and got their advertising taken care of and helped them out in that way. And so it let me learn a lot about different kinds of businesses. And eventually, Google did come along and we started to get the internet on our cell phones. And I realized that the Yellow Pages was probably going to decline. And I decided I would go back to my entrepreneurial enthusiasm. So I left the Yellow Pages to start a business with a partner, and we tried to buy a popular franchise, actually, but they told us our market was too small. So we just copied their idea, and we started our own business. And I know you talk a lot about systems. I read a copy of E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, and it just made so much sense to me. So I thought about the way I wanted my customers to be treated, what their experience would be like. And then I built the processes and systems and a couple of workflow tools that I could use with employees to make sure that my customer's experience was the way I wanted it to be. So we were doing junk removal. So what always upset me about being a homeowner and getting some kind of service at my home, everyone's had the experience with the telephone company or the cable company where they say, we'll come sometime between 9 and 5. And you're like, what am I supposed to do? Sit here all day, right? So our drivers, there would be a scheduled time. Maybe we're supposed to come to your house at 3:00, but in the morning, our drivers would call you and confirm that. And they would say, oh, I've got your work order here with me. I'm supposed to be at your house around 3. If things change throughout the day, I will call you and let you know. And so our drivers were making multiple phone calls a day to the different homeowners and keeping them apprised of when we were going to be there, or if there was a change in the schedule. And that was part of what I wanted people to experience. And so we built that business and ran it for almost 2 years. Eventually, I decided that I really wanted to get back to working with entrepreneurs again. And so I left that to start a finance brokerage. And I started to help people obtain debts for small businesses, as well as like leases factoring facilities, mostly to help people grow their business. But I started to meet people who were interested in getting money to buy a business. And I didn't really know a whole lot about buying businesses at that time, but I knew a little bit. And what I started to see was really shocking to me. People were getting into deals that were put together by people who really didn't have any idea how to sell a business. So real estate agents and other professionals were trying to put these deals together. And when I say they don't know what they were doing, I mean, for example, they wouldn't contemplate the operating capital needs of the business, or the contract wouldn't describe the state of the inventory on closing day. Just basic things that really are important when you're talking about buying or selling a business. And I knew that I didn't know what I needed to know to be a broker, but I was able to join with an international franchise name, and through them, I was able to go through a certification process to learn how exactly you evaluate a small business, how you present it for sale, how you arrange a deal between a buyer and the seller, how you help the buyer then obtain the financing from the bank. If you want to compare selling a business to selling a house, a business broker is kind of like the appraiser, the real estate agent, and the mortgage broker all in one, because we would evaluate the businesses and show the business owners what they would likely sell for. Then we would have to package it up and prepare all the documentation to find the buyer. So we would be advertising it in a confidential way, because if word gets out that a business is for sale, it can be ruined. And then we would meet the buyer, and then we would often have to work with the buyer to help them produce their business plan and cash flow forecast. And then we would introduce them to the lenders that we knew, that we had a relationship with, who we thought would do the deal. So we were kind of doing all these different parts. And the reason we had to do it all was because of this confidentiality thing. We couldn't have other experts doing different parts of it, or people would find out that the business was up for sale. And so I did business brokerage for about 3.5 years, sold 36 companies for other people while I was doing it. It was very exciting. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and it was a terrible business. And it was a terrible business because the model of business brokerage is kind of based upon the experience of real estate sales, in that you meet a seller and the seller pays you a commission when the business is sold. And the reality of these deals is that they are very complex. You can spend a lot of time with a buyer and seller who want to do a deal, months, and then you can have things happen that are completely outside of the control of all three of those parties. I've had deals fall apart because maybe the business was a franchise and the people at the franchise head office treated the buyer poorly and they didn't want to do a deal. I've had banks issue finance letters and then later call them back saying, oh, we changed our mind. We don't want to finance that industry anymore. I've had people want to buy a business in a licensed industry, and then the government agency that issues those licenses refuses the buyer. And so the deal falls apart. So, one of the first businesses I listed for sale when I started as a business broker at the end of 2008 was a fried chicken franchise. And when I left the industry in December of 2011, that was the last business I sold. So I worked on that deal for 3.5 years and had multiple buyers come and go over the course of that time, but I only got paid one time for it. And so that's why I say it's a terrible business. There's just so much up in the air that you don't control as a business broker. But boy, did I learn a lot. And when I left the industry, I went into banking and I became a banker. And it's funny, what happened was people just kept calling me. People would get my name from other people. They were working on deals of their own, looking for someone to guide them or give them advice. And so then I started to dip my toe back into the world with a little bit of a different model. And so today, the way I work with people is I work as a consultant, and I've got a series of different kinds of consulting projects that we do. And then I got into education. So I've written a bunch of books and I have a few online courses as well. So people that want to go down this path of either buying or selling, we help those people. And we work with multiple new people every week. And it's this exposure. I have a team of people now, but it's this exposure to so many deals on an ongoing basis that really gives us insight into what works, what doesn't. We can spot red flags in a deal pretty quickly because you may be looking at the very first dry cleaner or laundromat or restaurant that you've ever looked at. I've helped probably 200 people look at restaurants. And so we get to learn what we need to look for in each kind of deal and learn a little bit about how you conceptualize things in a different way. And it's interesting to me that, just to take you on a little aside story here, I had a consulting call just a few weeks ago with a lady who was looking at buying a bridal salon. So they sell wedding dresses there. And at the beginning of the season, they have to buy these samples from the manufacturers, and they bring these into the shop, and ladies come in, they try on the dresses. And if they decide they like that dress, then a custom one is made to measure for that woman. And so these sample dresses stay in the store, and they might stay there for a year. And then ultimately they try to sell them when that dress is no longer available. Now, here's the interesting thing. In a lot of bridal salons, they'll work with their local accountant, and their local accountant is helping a lot of different people in a lot of different businesses. And they will buy those sample dresses and they'll treat them as inventory, but they're not. So let me explain the difference. So a store like Walmart, they'll buy products, they bring it into the store, and then we walk into Walmart, we pick up the product, we buy it, we take it home. That is what normally inventory is. It's a product that goes into your stock to be sold. These dresses are not inventory. They are sales aids. So this is something that the store buys that they use to then sell other dresses. And so it should not be accounted for as inventory. What it should be accounted for is strictly an expense. This is money we spend in order to have the quote unquote marketing material or the sales material we need in the shop to sell the dresses. At the end, when that dress is no longer going to be used for a sales aid, sure, you can have a sale and try to sell it. That liquidation at the end is simply, offsets part of the investment that you've made in these sales aids. But what often you find in these bridal shops is you'll find that they've got this accumulated inventory that's piled up year after year after year. And so the shop might have $300,000 worth of these dresses, right? But none of them can be used anymore to order dresses. They're all just these old, out-of-date bits of sales aids. And the reason this is a problem is because in the prior periods, the purchase of those dresses should have been expensed, but it wasn't. It was put into inventory, and this would have inflated the profitability of the shop on paper in those periods, right? And it's interesting because, the way that you conceptually look at these things and figure out how the business operates and what the business model is can have a huge impact on what the true profitability of the business is and what the real cash flow is going to be for the buyer. And unfortunately, a lot of people who get into business, of course, they're not accounting experts. They go to their accountant, they trust that person, they get set up with a certain thing, and they believe they're doing everything correctly. But when you show this to a buyer, and then the buyer in turn tries to explain this stuff to the seller and shows them that the business isn't worth nearly as much as they thought, people get upset and angry about that, unfortunately, because they put this effort into the business. And a lot of the times, especially in that bridal salon situation, they would have been reporting profits and paying income tax on profits that really weren't there. And this accumulation of these old dresses would have literally been the profit that they had been taxed on, which they never really should have been.
This brings up many points, like just this example. First of all, does the actual business owner understand their business? Do they know where the value is in their business, and how would the purchaser look at it and actually evaluate it? That's one part of the equation. The other is the business broker actually presenting it the way they should present it?
Well, and this is the other interesting thing that we see all the time, is that there's no professional licensing or barrier to entry to call yourself a business broker. In some states and provinces, business brokers have to have a real estate license, believe it or not. And this is like these are old rules that date back to the time when most businesses operated out of a building that they owned. And it's just not like that anymore. One of the biggest problems I find with this issue, where in some places business brokers have to have a real estate license, is that sometimes that then makes real estate agents feel like they are therefore qualified to sell businesses, which they are not.
Yeah.
It's a completely different kind of thing. You talk about what is driving value for a buyer. I always say it comes down to two questions. The first question is, what is the cash flow that the business delivers? And in particular, the cash flow in excess of the fair market value of the time the owner's putting into it. So most small businesses are owner operated. And I always challenge small business owners to find out, what would you be paid if somebody else owned the business, if you were an employee? So if let's say you run you run a tire shop, and the going market rate for being a manager of a tire shop is $80,000 a year. So as the owner of the tire shop, you can take whatever salary you want. It's your business. It's up to you what you take. And sometimes if there's a lot of extra cash, people will take a higher salary. That's fine. But what we want to do is we want to normalize that. And we want to then say, if you were just taking 80,000, like the going rate for managing this shop, how much would be extra? What extra profit would be there? Because this is really the rate of return on your investment in the business. Unfortunately, a lot of people out there are running a tire shop, for example, like my example, but they're not paying themselves a fair market wage. They're only paying themselves $60,000. And the problem with that is that if your business isn't delivering enough cash flow for you to take a fair market wage, then you are subsidizing your business with time. Yeah. You're donating part of your day to your business to keep it running. And without that subsidy, it would likely be closed. So the first question is, what is the cash flow? The cash flow is going to determine the value. Yeah. So if you have a business that's earning $150,000 in cash flow, somebody might be willing to pay you somewhere between 2 and 2.5 times, for example, that number as the value of your business. So that's the first big question. The second big question that they're going to ask is, if I do this deal, is that cash flow going to continue when I become the owner?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that question is actually the bigger one. So you meet the cash flow test, you got a profitable business, it's worth something. The second question is, will the cash flow continue? And that's when the buyer is going to start asking themselves questions like, how do the customers arrive? Are they coming to do business with the shop, or are they coming to do business with the owner?
Exactly, yeah.
We call that locus of goodwill. Where's the goodwill located in this enterprise? And then there's other things like, hey, I've never run a tire shop before. How do I know I'm going to be able to do it? And the way that you overcome these kinds of objections is by being able to show somebody that you have documented procedures and processes, and there's actually an instruction book. I compare it to a board game like Monopoly, right? And if you've ever seen, very young children open up a board game, young children who don't read, they'll take out all the pieces and they'll move them around the board. Then maybe they'll roll the dice, or they'll play with the paper money or something. But they don't really get anything accomplished because they don't know the rules. In order to really enjoy the game, you have to have the instructions. And listen, there's been countless examples where I've seen people back away from doing deals when they realize that there's just nothing documented. Everything about the business is in the owner's head.
Exactly.
And they don't feel confident that when they take over, they're going to be able to make the business function the way the seller has.
And that's interesting, because like sometimes the owner wants to be the hero, like they're the person that knows everything, they're the person solving all of the problems. That doesn't really help you.
You have to really show that, in an ideal scenario, as your business grows, you need to be offloading responsibilities and offloading functions onto employees. And probably the most critical one is that interface with clientele, And so if you think about any business that you go to as a customer, that you walk in and, somebody serves you, right? And that person you're dealing with is an employee, that business is far more transferable than a business where everybody's dealing with the owner.
You want to make sure that the business can run without the owner being there. That's part one. The other part is it can generate revenue without the owner actually being dependent on his name. Hey, a quick commercial break. This podcast is brought to you by Business Optimization Partners, a firm that specializes in helping entrepreneurs systemize their business and transform it into a professionally managed asset that is scalable and easy to operate. If you wish to learn more, download the guide to running a professionally managed business that's available in the description. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah. And you're really taking it to a whole new level there. And certain businesses are easier than others. Obviously, a little corner store, convenience store, very easy to run that business without the owner being there. And I'll almost say that one of the indicators that a particular kind of business is easily systematized is the presence of franchises in the industry. So, we see franchise convenience stores, or big chains. So we see this in gas stations and convenience stores, restaurants, etc. But even in things like carpet cleaning, certain kinds of businesses are very easy to systematize and teach somebody how to do their job and teach somebody how to deal with customers. Other industries, it's very different. One of the examples I often think of when I think about a complex business that's difficult to transfer would be something like an architecture firm. And maybe there's a well-known architect that is the leader of the business and they personally won awards for designs that they've done and buildings that they've built. In that case, the people that are going to that firm, very often, they're being drawn by the reputation of that person.
Yeah.
And they want to deal with that person and know that that person is going to be looking after their file to some degree. And so when those businesses are sold, it's very common for those sellers to be tied in for many years afterwards. Oftentimes it'll be presented as a partnership. They'll sell their business to a new person, but they got to stay. And the new person comes on and then they pretend that they are partners for a while. And this is one of the few ways
This
that
is the
the
workaround.
goodwill from the old owner can transfer over to the new person.
Yeah. So you've talked about business brokers, like from a seller's perspective, how can you know that this is the right broker to work with? Like I've talked to many of them. And in many cases, those guys, as you said, like they're treating it as a real estate transaction. They have no clue what they're selling. They just have no idea. You ask them a couple of questions and they're like, that's amazing. It's a good question. Let's take it to the owner. There's that part. First of all, they don't know what they're selling, but they also don't know the industry that the business is in. How do you understand or determine that this is the right broker to select?
So if you're a business owner and you're looking to deal with a business broker, what you want to do, number one, is you want to get samples of what are called SIMs or business profiles they've created for other people. Okay. So this will let you look at how they've presented other businesses that they've sold for other people. You then want to put the buyer hat on and you want to pretend that you are going to be a buyer of one of those businesses. And then you walk yourself through the deal. So you look at the asking price, think about what is included in that transaction, what is not included in that transaction. Look at how much money you think a likely buyer is going to have. So, who is that buyer? For example, the likely buyer of a small restaurant is probably somebody who's already in the hospitality industry, right? And they probably don't have a whole lot of money. And so how would somebody who doesn't have a lot of money buy that business? And you want to work through the deal and see, is it affordable? How would I be able to make the debt service payments with the cash flow they're showing? Would I be able to take home a reasonable salary? And so these are very easy tests to do. And what you'll find is that, because I see this all the time, it's very common for business brokers to price a business at 2 or 3 times what it really should be selling for. And if you sit down and look at it from a buyer's point of view, you very quickly realize there's no way it could ever work. So if the business broker you're talking to is presenting businesses in this fashion, does it really show that they understand what they're doing and how to sell a business, right? And so, you mentioned asking questions. Every business owner should have business owner friends and use your network. When you look at some of these sample business profiles or SIMs that the broker has given to you, share them with some of your friends who also own businesses. Say, hey, let's look at this together. What questions do you have about this business? What should be revealed that is not? If the broker shows you a business profile for a restaurant, take it to one of your restaurateur friends and see what they think, right? And what I find happens a lot is business owners are very much experts in whatever it is that their business does. But people are not really experts in the world of buying and selling businesses because most people, will do it once if they're lucky. And it is very difficult to get one of these deals done. Popular business for sale website, Biz Buy Sell, says that 80% of the businesses listed on their site do not sell. Okay. So it's hard. I tell people all the time that getting an offer on your business is like winning a lottery.
Yeah.
And then selling the business is like winning it again. It's like winning it twice in a row. Okay. So take advantage of your networks, take advantage of people that you know, look at what the broker is producing from the vantage point of a buyer. And if you don't see how that business makes any sense at the price that's being asked or how anyone could ever make a deal to buy it, then you're dealing with a broker who doesn't understand what they're doing. And this is what a broker is doing. When a business broker meets you, it's almost like they run a store. Think of it like a candy store. They're running a business store and they're trying to find inventory for their business store. And you as a business seller, you are a provider. You're like the candy maker, the manufacturer, right? So the candy store owner needs to be able to secure good candy at a reasonable price. That's what the broker should be doing with you. They should be saying, hey, this is the price that I can sell your business for. I'm going to have to earn a commission. This is what you're going to get for your business, and here's why. And then they're going to turn around and they have to then please the other half of the market. So in a candy store, we're talking about the people coming in who want to buy the candy. In the business store, we're talking about the buyers. So a business buyer is going to come in and look at the businesses for sale, and they're going to say, okay, I need to make a reasonable investment, want to work in a business that I own that I'm going to enjoy, and I have to be able to pay my debts, pay my taxes, and make money, right? And so it's not hard to understand that ultimately the party that needs to be satisfied in this whole arrangement is the buyer. They're the ones ultimately that bring the money to the table. And so what fascinates me about business broker marketing is that the things they will send out to business owners are consistently these pieces of marketing that will say, I can sell your business for the highest price. We have a special way to sell it for more, blah, 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 right? The truth is that your business is worth a certain number based on the cash flow it produces. And in a competitive marketplace with lots of business brokers, there are going to be all kinds of people who will say whatever they need to secure your listing because it gives them an exclusive right to sell your business. And then once they have that, they're just going to hope that somebody comes along is going to buy your business. And if they don't, all they've lost is their time. But you've lost a year of your retirement or whatever other reason is pushing you towards wanting to sell.
What's the duration, typical duration that a broker would basically hold this deal?
So typically, like in the United States, a lot of listing agreements for 6 months to a year. In Canada, they tend to be always 12 months at least, sometimes 18 months.
From a seller's perspective, there's a lead time to actually prepare your business for the sale. When should they start thinking about selling their business?
So a catchy little slogan that a lot of people say is you should start to think about selling your business or your exit when you start. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that you need to really start to put some work into making sure your business is saleable. Once your profitability crosses that line where you're able to pay yourself a fair market wage as the owner manager, and then there's extra money. Because at that point, you really have something worth selling. You've got a business that's producing a business rate of return. Before you reach that point, you just own a job or a hobby, depending on whether you're putting extra time in for free or not. And so if somebody is working in a business they own and they're only really earning what they would earn working for somebody else, it's going to be really tough to ever sell that business.
The price would reflect in the evaluation.
Yeah, well, imagine this. Imagine a plumber with a couple of vans and a couple of employees, and that plumber works full time and only ever earns themselves $80,000 or $100,000 a year. What is that worth to somebody? Somebody might want to move to your city who is a plumber, and they might want to take that over, but they're going to be thinking about it not with respect to it being a business, but they're going to be thinking about the stuff they're getting. They're going to be thinking about the vans, the tools, et cetera, that they're going to be getting when they buy your business, because there's nothing really there beyond the value of the person's time. And so if your business is smaller and it doesn't have that cash flow, make sure that you have some other plan for funding your retirement. Some of the saddest cases that I ever deal with is when people have put decades of their life into their business, which was only ever marginal all the way along and didn't really produce much of a living for them. But they've got this idea in their head that someday they'll be able to sell this business and cash out in a big way, and this will finance their retirement. If you have a good, profitable business, you should be taking money out of your business and creating other aspects of your personal net worth, other investments or whatever they are in the stock market, mutual funds, real estate, whatever. And the business should just be one of this portfolio of assets. If you're worried about this, then talk with somebody who can actually show you what your business might sell for well before you get to retirement. Because if it does turn out that your business is not worth that much, you need to make an alternative plan. You need to, and listen, Jad, there are, unfortunately, for example, financial planners out there who will meet with business owners and talk with them about investing for their retirement, investing for their future. And the financial planner will ask someone, are you going to sell your business one day and make that money part of your retirement plan? And a business owner could say yes. And the financial planner will then say, great, what do you think you're going to sell your business for? Oh, $500,000. And then they'll put that number into the plan. They'll actually create a retirement plan for the person that says at age 65, $500,000 will come into this portfolio, and they'll never test it. They'll never look at the business, see what the business would really sell for. And these are tragic situations.
And the problem here is that the business is not ready for sale. So they decide that they want to sell it at the last day, and they think it'll sell in a month, and with no transition plan.
Yes. And as you're aware, these things are more complex. You have to have all of that documented system stuff in place, the policies, the procedures, the work tools. You have to be able to show somebody else how this business is run and how they are going to be able to operate it and get the same kind of cash flow out of it that you have. And it's different for people in different kinds of industries. Like, I'll use a roofing company as an example. Yeah. If you are a roofer and you handle the sales and you coordinate the workers and you coordinate the logistics for the delivery of materials and the manpower to show up and do the jobs, and you are the foreman and all this kind of stuff, and maybe your wife at home does the paperwork and invoicing at the kitchen table, that business, it's a very small business. Could that business ever be sold if nothing's written down and everything's in the owner's head? Maybe, but it can only ever be sold to someone else that knows roofing.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe another roofer that's 20 years younger might want to step into that role because they understand the things that are going on in the owner's head. But it will never be sold to the guy that works at the post office.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the problem. Yeah, that's the problem, man. What you mentioned is very important. Like sometimes even businesses that have been there for 20, 30 years and the owner wants to sell now, but the revenue numbers aren't there. Like, so what do we do? Where do we, especially, and this happens especially in construction, like general contracting companies, things like that. It's very heavily dependent on the reputation of this person.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to things like contracting, it really comes down to how do you get the customers and is it transferable? So, there's a couple of different kinds of contractors out there. There's people who do bathroom renovations. There's people who build houses. There's people who do subcontracting work for other builders, right? And each of those kinds of construction companies is very, very different from the point of view of how they market themselves and how they are regarded in the marketplace. So the contractor that does sub-trade work for bigger builders, right? So think of the plumber who got the contract for the condo tower, right? The problem they have is that they're doing very few jobs every year because, one big condo tower is going to tie up a bunch of their people and it's a lot of work for them. But the other problem is that the general contractors that are building the condo tower, they know what the plumber's margins should be. They know what the cost should be. And so you have this limit to profit because the person you're working for understands your business. And if you try to give them a price that's too high, they know, and they'll go to someone else, right? And that kind of business, it's very difficult to develop any degree of goodwill because you've got that pricing limitation.
Yes.
Then if you look at the home builder, okay, why are people going to the home builder? Probably word of mouth, right? And so the past, purchasers of homes from that home builder, what are they going to say? Are they going to say ABC Custom Homes is great? Or are they going to say John was great, right? And so in that company, if the owner is the primary point of contact, the lead person in charge, the lead salesperson, it's going to be tough for anyone new to take over that company because they are not John in that case. When it comes to, for example, the bathroom renovation company, or even like a plumbing company doing service work, or an electrical company doing service work, if you've got a lot of different jobs on the go and you're talking about a relatively lower ticket renovation, even though bathrooms could be $10,000 to $30,000 or more, probably, there's a lot more customers that are going to be coming through your system. And because there's going to be a lot more customers, the owner of that business just can't be the one who is managing all the stuff happening with those jobs. And so what's going to happen is you're going to have people in the office who can answer the phone and deal with customers that are not you. You're going to have people on the job site that are going to be able to talk to customers, and that's not going to be the owner. So you're going to have these foremen, these salespeople type roles. And so the connection between the marketplace and your business is not just going to be tied to that one person. So for all three of those companies in the construction trades, which one would I rather acquire? It would be that bathroom renovation company.
Less risk.
Yeah, less risk, and the thing is with something like that, if it's been around for a long enough time and they've been doing, 2 or 3 bathrooms a week for 30 years, well, you've actually got paperwork. You know which houses had their bathroom renovated 30 years ago. You can go knock on some doors. There may be a new owner, but to be able to say, hi, we're the company that did the renovation 30 years ago, and we wanted to know if maybe you'd like to talk about updating it now. I mean, there's all kinds of advantages there.
Absolutely, yeah. And from a buyer's perspective, what do you find are the most common mistakes buyers do?
Yeah, the biggest mistakes buyers do is that they don't do a proper cash flow forecast. So they will look at sort of the money available in a deal, and they'll look at certain terms, certain types of cash flow calculations we use in the business brokerage industry, like seller's discretionary earnings. And they'll see that number and they think that this is what they will earn as the owner. And that's not what they'll earn. Seller's discretionary earnings is a number that is achieved by adding back certain things. And then from that number, the buyer has to pay themselves, service their debts, pay taxes, take care of capital expenditures. There's a whole bunch of things. And so when you don't properly plan out a cash flow forecast and think about what different things do I need to pay for, what you will end up doing is you'll end up overcommitting your cash flow to debt service. And people buy a business because they want to avoid market risk. Market risk is the risk of not having enough customers, right? And so you think, okay, instead of starting a business that's unknown, I'll buy one that people are aware of and they'll have customers. But if you buy that business and you put too much debt onto it, then you end up in almost the same position, because you can end up in a place where if sales go down by 10% because of your big debt payments, you then can't afford to pay yourself. So it's the same risky position, just instead of market risk, now you have financing risk.
Makes sense.
And I run into people all the time who get into trouble because they will overpay for a small business, thinking that there's all these advantages that they've obtained by buying an established name. And then because they didn't do a proper cash flow forecast that considered all the things that they were going to have to be paying out, they put themselves into what a friend of mine calls tight shoes. There's not much room to maneuver, and everything has to be perfect. And in small business, things are never perfect. There's always something that goes wrong or something that needs to be addressed. And in particular, at the point of acquisition, Americans have access to the SBA program. They can put up to 90% financing on a small business.
Which is crazy.
Canadians don't have access to as much leverage, but the point at which you buy the business is your point of maximum leverage, and that's your point of maximum risk. So we're buying what is well known to be a highly risky kind of asset. And then we're applying a high degree of leverage to it, which just increases the risk. And so everything's got to work just right for the first few years before prices start to go up because of inflation. You start to become more competent as an owner, more experience, and the balances of your debt start to decline a little bit. After 3 or 4 years, you start to get a little bit of breathing room. But for those first few years, everything has to work just right.
And that's the importance of like working with someone like you, because most of those small business owners are very experienced at the technical aspect of their job, but have no idea about what are the risks, what could go wrong.
Most small business owners do spend a lot of time thinking about their customers. They think about their customers, what their customers want, what their customer would be willing to pay. They think about their customer. And then when it comes time to selling the business, for some reason, people become very self-centered. Instead of thinking about the person who's going to buy the business, they start to just think about themselves. They're like, well, I'm going to get $1 million. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that, right? And when you want to sell your business, you're still in business serving someone, but now you're trying to sell the business to a buyer. And the deal has to make sense to them. And it doesn't take much to try to put yourself in the buyer's shoes to figure out, how are they going to pay for this? What kind of debt are they going to have? Where are they going to get the money? How much is it going to cost? What are the payments going to be? And realize if what your expectations are of selling the business are in any way realistic.
Did you find that this SBA loan is helping get more deals done, or compared to what's happening in Canada?
So in the States, whenever you make financing easier, are you helping people to buy something, or are you helping people to sell something? And so just like E to qualify for mortgages help people sell houses, and E to qualify for car loans help people sell cars, high degrees of financing available from a bank helps people sell businesses. And so the higher degree of financing means that there's more buyers that can qualify. Greater number of buyers chasing the same number of businesses causes the pressures where we see prices go up. And so, higher leverage, higher prices, greater risk. You can still do a good deal. You can still do a deal that makes sense. I work with people all the time that do. You just can't get caught up in what we'll call the program. And so the program is you go to a broker, you go sign up for the maximum loan you can get. You leverage yourself to the hilt. You buy the business and you cross your fingers and you hope that it works out. And there are all kinds of examples of people doing that kind of thing. And if you're lucky, it'll work out. If you're not lucky and you fail, the chances of you appearing on a podcast to tell everyone about your failure is very low. And I bring this up specifically because people will get into this buying and selling business online content, and the vast majority of it is people telling their success stories. Very little of it is people coming on telling about the problems, the hazards, the failures, all that kind of thing. And the statistics tell us that small business is risky. And people will point to things like small business loan default rates. They'll say very few people ever default on their business loan. But that is not an indicator of success. Over the course of my career, I've met many, many people who bought a business, ended up over leveraged, sales went down or something like this. They're not taking a salary. They're living off their spouse's income, but they're still making their loan payments because they personally guaranteed the loan payment, right? And to me, that's not success. That's being stuck. And I tell you to people all the time, there's only 2 ways to win at buying a small business. You either buy a mature, cash flowing, profitable business at a reasonable price that allows you to make money, or you end up keeping your money in the bank. And that second thing that I said, you end up keeping your money in the bank, you don't do a deal, that is a successful outcome. But most people that come into this space don't understand it's a successful outcome. They say, well, I need to get a deal done. I need to get a deal done. And the moment that you start acting under compulsion and you are excited and anxious to do a deal, you'll get a deal done. But the problem is you then have to operate the business. I call it the day 2 problem. Like after you do the deal, you have to be able to make it work.
based on all of this experience that you have right now, if let's say you're not in the education business, you're doing something else, what are you excited about? Which field would you be buying a business in?
I'm excited about the types of businesses that satisfy people's needs. A lot of people will say, oh, do you think the economy is going into recession, right? And so whether or not the economy goes into recession, there is a certain population of people who will always have a job because of the type of work that they do or who they work for. And there's going to be certain needs that those people are always going to have. Even the people that become unemployed are still, to some degree, going to be spending money on some things. And so, people still need to get to work. People still need to travel. There's still going to be tire shops. There's still going to be, people serving needs of people fixing things at home, that kind of thing. There's always going to be an economy to some degree. What is going to change probably is just the degree to which discretionary spending happens. And so if you think that we're on the cusp of a recession or that things are going to be in a downturn, just ask yourself, when you look at the business that you're considering to buy, is this something that someone can very easily decide to no longer purchase if they become tight with cash, right? And that would be one of the litmus tests that I would apply.
Yeah. So congratulations on the new published book, Buying versus Starting.
Yeah. That came out in September. I've got a copy right here. It's available on Amazon, Buying versus Starting a Small Business. And it's been doing well. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback. And what's great about the book is that at the end of each chapter, I've got a summary of the points, but then I've got some questions that you should really ask yourself if you're considering either buying or starting a small business. And I've heard from readers who've sat down and really put work into it. They've written out answers to these questions and really challenged themselves personally. And that's the way to take advantage of the book, to really figure out, what are your motivations? What are you willing to do? And where your limits are, what you're not willing to do. Because when you get into the heat of the moment and you're excited about that business and you just know it's going to work because you feel it in your stomach or what have you, you can get excited to the point of doing something that you really shouldn't do. A friend of mine named Ted Leverett calls that buyer fever. People get super excited and then end up making a mistake. And the best way to avoid buyer fever is to have things written down objectively that you can go and review and read, especially if you've written them down before you looked at the business that you got excited about.
Thank you for this. It was very insightful. If someone wants to learn more about your services, how can they get in touch?
Sure. My website is davidcbarnett.com. You can find all my contact information there. And if anyone is just interested in the world of buying, selling, financing, or managing small businesses, just look up David C. Barnett and Small Business anywhere, podcasting, apps, YouTube, anywhere, and you'll find me.
Thank you, David. Thanks for tuning into the Resilient in Business podcast. This show is all about providing valuable insights and inspiring entrepreneurs to keep pushing forward no matter the challenges. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and help us spread the message. See you on the next one.